Today, the distribution of animals on Earth is tied to the position of continents. So there are animals which only live in Africa. There are animals which only live in South America or Australia. The same was true of fossil animals. And given that continents move, the distribution of fossil animals on the face of the Earth has then been tied to the movement of continents. Now, the idea of plate tectonics, the idea that the continental crust is divided into these crustal plates which move, is a relatively new idea with an enormous amount of evidence we can observe this. But one of the first pieces of evidence was to support this was the evidence of shared events and characteristics of the southern continents, which we now know were joined in a supercontinent known as Gondwana. Not only were there physical attributes which they shared, such as a shared similarity of the poles, of the evidence of an ice age, which only the southern continents experienced in the late Paleozoic, but also if one were to consider the distribution of a number of different plants and animal groups, they are only found on the southern continents, distributed in a way that suggests that these continents were joined. So we see this today and throughout the fossil record, but it was actually one of the first evidences of plate tectonics. Now, this was especially important when we talk about the transition of planet Earth from the end of the Mesozoic after the mass extinction which wiped out the dinosaurs, and then the age of mammals and the Cenozoic. So once again, here, therapsids like Lystrosaurus were distributed all throughout Earth when there was a supercontinent Pangea, because they could move. The continents were joined. But then as the Triassic period ended, the Atlantic Ocean began to form. And there was also a Tethys seaway, which would be important in the evolution of the early whales, which would separate northern and southern continents. Gondwana began to break up in the Cretaceous. So for example, South America and Africa stayed together for a very long time. And we can still see the effects of this today in that fish like lungfish are distributed among the southern continents, not the northern. There are legless amphibians known as caecilians, primarily found in the southern continents, while others, such as salamanders, primarily found in the northern continents. And so once these continents began to separate, then this affected the distribution of the animals that lived at that time, and then also their descendants which are alive today. When we look at fossil records, there were certain types of crocodile which were found in southern continents, certain types of dinosaur which were found in southern continents. So the Gigantosaurus and Carcharodontosaurus from South America and Africa were related. There seemed to be the ability to move from South America through Antarctica, Australia, and India. Antarctica was not yet frozen at the poles. And so in addition to having egg-laying monotreme mammals in Australia, there are also a few fossils known in South America. The boa constrictors and pythons are related. And so that same idea of biogeography was important throughout the fossil record, and we even see evidence of that today. But when the Cretaceous period and the Mesozoic era ended, and the Cenozoic era and the age of mammals began, most of the continents were floating islands. Now, there apparently were a few examples where some animals were able to move from one continent to another, just as some animals make it onto islands, perhaps in a storm, they are attached to, a floating mass of vegetation and land on a new site. So monkeys managed to get to South America. There were rodents, primitive rodents, which managed to travel throughout the world. So there was some degree of movement. But for the most part, one of the things that begins in the early Cenozoic is that for example, elephants are only known from Africa. The marsupials are known from essentially Australia and South America. The groups which evolve in North America include horses and camels. So if you were to go to different continents, many animals would be endemic to specific parts of the world. Africa was not touching the Arabian Peninsula or Spain. Australia and Indonesia were farther apart. India had not yet fused to southern Asia. That would happen partway through the Cenozoic. And South America had not only separated from Africa, but Central America did not yet join the two Americas. And so the life in South America was endemic there. The animals which evolved here existed nowhere else in the world. And that was the situation throughout most of the Cenozoic era. So from, sorry, there we go. From when the Cenozoic began, South America was isolated from Africa. And it would not be until the end of the Cenozoic, about 4 million years ago, so 60 million years after the Cenozoic began, that the Americas were joined. And so South America spent most of the Cenozoic era, 60 million years, isolated, not touching another continent, although it seems that there was a connection through Antarctica for a while. North America did have connections from time to time to both Europe and Australia. And so then North America got a number of plant-eating animals, of carnivorous mammals that South America would not have. 4 million years ago, give or take, when the continental plates joined the Americas, there could now, for the first time, be a significant migration from animals from South America coming north and animals from North America coming south in what was known as the Great American Interchange. So I'd like to go through how the Great American Interchange affected a number of different groups. First off, today we associate marsupials primarily with Australia, but marsupials were very common in South America as well. Today there are a number of kinds of opossum in South America, and then a number of these animals, you might think that they look like rodents, but actually they're marsupials, more closely related to kangaroos than they are to rodents today. Other fossil marsupials included some that look like coyotes, some that look like bears, some that look like saber-toothed cats. Once again, these are more closely related to opossums and kangaroos than any other mammals like cats or dogs or bears. So South America was like Australia in that there were a lot of marsupials endemic to South America. Birds were quite successful. After the extinction of the meat-eating dinosaurs, many birds became the dominant predators. Now this occurred throughout the world in the Paleocene, but then throughout the Cenozoic until its final days, then there were birds which were 6 feet tall, 9 feet tall and taller, which were dominant predators throughout South America. One, after the Americas joined, actually then made it into North America. And there are fossils of the giant predatory bird Titanus in Florida. While marsupials like opossums, opossum-like animals, did live in North America when the Cenozoic began, apparently they became extinct. And it was not until this Great American Interchange that opossums returned to North America. So the opossum of North America today is a recent migrant from South America. In only the most recent a couple of million years has it returned to North America. So North America did get an opossum out of the exchange. Briefly, there was that giant terror bird, Titanus. And now let me address a few other animal groups. As mammals adapted to being herbivores, prior to the extinction of the dinosaurs, dinosaurs were the major herbivores on Earth. Mammals were not. There was a group of herbivores which evolved in South America, which were only distantly related to the herbivores elsewhere. And then there were groups which only existed in South America, such as anteaters, sloths. There's a difference between American and English pronunciation of sloth, so sloth, either is fine. There were armadillos, sloths, and anteaters. These only existed in South America. When the Americas joined, some of the armadillos came north. So obviously in places like Florida, Texas, and Mexico and Central America, you can find armadillos today. They are recent migrants. And there were even some of the giant glyptodonts, which were huge armored armadillos, which made it into North America about 4 million years ago and became extinct recently. So here we see a tree sloth today. They're very slow moving, living in trees, but they had elephant-sized ground sloth relatives, which were absolutely huge. They were major animals in South America. And actually in the interchange, some came to North America as well. Thomas Jefferson wrote a paper describing the fossils of a ground sloth, which was featured very prominently in the Academy of Sciences in Philadelphia in the young United States. This was, their major philosophical and scientific society. So, this was of interest even in, some of the founding fathers. South America had monkeys, which existed nowhere else in the world, some bats, and a number of rodents. Here we see anteaters. The anteaters, some like the tumandua, has a shorter skull, but the great anteater has simply elongated the tip of the snout. Some of these would make their way into Mexico and Central America, like the capybara, the world's largest rodent today. Porcupines are rodents which were native to South America, which then came to North America. They're recent migrants. Now, while some rodents came north, some came south, such as rabbits. And so North America did get a few migrants out of this Great American Interchange. Opossums, armadillos, and porcupines have survived throughout the continents till today. And you can find some of the New World monkeys and rodents in Mexico and Central America and Southern North America. The effect on South America, however, was so much greater because South America didn't have any deer. They had those native plant-eating mammals which occurred nowhere else. And so the deer of South America today, these are very new. They came from North America. North America had deer, South America did not. And so these went to South America in the Great American Interchange. North America had camels. Now camels include llamas, guanacos, vicuñas, and so these were not native to South America. So North American camels went south. So the llamas and guanacos of South America today were native to North America. North America had pigs and South America did not. And so it was in the Great American Interchange that many types of pigs went south, giving rise to a couple of different types of peccary, including the tagua, which is the largest wild pig alive today, and was only recently discovered in the middle of central South America, like primarily in Paraguay, but also in Argentina and Bolivia. The tagua lives in the dry area known as the Chaco. But that's a recent North American interchange. Tapirs are perissodactyls relative of rhinos. They are found in South America today, but they were a North American immigrant. And then also horses came to South America, although they did not survive until the modern day. You can find fossils of the three-toed hipparian horses in South America only after the interchange began. A number of elephants were able to migrate to South America from North America. So South America didn't have elephants for the longest time. But there you can find elephant tusks from the most recent times in South America. So a lot of herbivores in South America today, like deer and tapirs and pigs, they are actually of recent North American origin. And the same can be said of carnivores. If you were to ask what carnivores existed in North America late in the Cenozoic, there was a diversity of cats, including saber-toothed cats. There was a diversity of dogs. There was a diversity of bears. There, were raccoons and otters. So there were members of the order Carnivora. No members of the order Carnivora lived in South America at the time. They did have those predatory terror birds, and South America did have those marsupial predators, but no members of the order Carnivora. 4 million years ago, all of a sudden, members of the order Carnivora can now migrate to South America. And when you ask what carnivores are present in South America today, there are maned wolves and ground dogs and foxes. And so, canids came down. There are a number of cats, from jaguars to ocelots, et cetera. So felids came down. There are pumas in South America today. And fossils include the saber-toothed cats, which were major predators in South America, but only in the most recent couple million years. Raccoons came down. So not only are there raccoons in South America, but also the coatis, which are their relatives. A number of mustelids came down, like skunks. Otters came down, giving not only the river otter, but also the giant Brazilian otters, which can reach 5 feet long. Bears were able to reach South America. Now, not only are there bears in South America today, like in Colombia and Venezuela, but one of the bears, which was already huge in North America, then when it got to South America, evolved into an even larger species. So Arctodus from North America evolves into Arctotherium in South America, which we estimate could be 1,000 pounds heavier than the largest polar bear. So it was the largest carnivorous mammal we think ever. And so not only was that a significant period, just in general, it was devastating to the South American native life. They had never had to face cats and saber-toothed cats and dogs and bears and weasels and raccoons and otters, and now they had to face them all at once. And so there was this incredible influx of new species into South America. Oops. And so then as that might have been the end of mine. And so the effects were absolutely devastating to South America. I would just like to end with this slide. I had the privilege of living in South America in the Peace Corps. And while I was there, I'd learned that one of the mythological figures of the Guarani Indians was a sloth-like animal known as the owl. So this was kind of in the pantheon of, mystical features, the owl. Now, in my ignorance, I just kind of thought it was silly. because modern sloths in the British pronunciation, are so slow that the idea that one of this could be like this scary, terrifying thing, it's kind of ridiculous. But then, upon pondering this, these in addition to the tree sloths alive today, there was huge elephant-sized ground sloths. Not only did they make it in North America, but they were native to South America throughout the continent. So the early Native Americans who spread throughout South America, they almost certainly would have encountered these. Now, I'm just making, everything I'm about to say, I'm just making up. But if one was part of, say, a hunting party that killed this elephant, sized giant sloth, I'm assuming that story would get told. And I'm assuming that people would then tell their children and then maybe their grandchildren. And so it's possible, in fact, likely, that the legends of mythological, figures, including the sloth-like owl from the Guarani Indians in Central South America, that they're actually kind of cultural remembrances of the wild animals which were present as early humans very recently started to spread throughout the continents, what they encountered prior to their extinction. And so the Great American Interchange had some effect on North America. There are North American animals which owe their origin to that interchange. But the effect on South America was overwhelming, that the majority of the mammals in South America today, or at least the larger ones, the large herbivores, certainly the carnivores, these were not native to South America in the majority of the Cenozoic era for 60 million years. Instead, they are recent North American migrants, which caused the extinction of the endemic South American native fauna.